On today's episode of Left Off the Map, Henry Terry is visiting one of my favourite accommodation places in all of Tasmania, Avalon Coastal Retreat. Back in the kitchen, I'm making an apricot cobbler. We're starting the episode with a restaurant-style dish, crispy skinned duck with braised fennel and a fennel sauce. Duck breast is one of those ingredients that you normally have for a special occasion. There are a few little tips I'm going to give you on how to best prepare fresh duck breast. I'm going to serve mine with some braised fennel. So I'll prepare my fennel first. I want to cut this into slices about 1 centimetre thick. All right. So we are going to give that a little bit of colour and then braise it in a pretty simple master stock with some vinegar, sugar, garlic, star anise and some chicken stock. So, into my pan, a little bit of oil. I'll heat that up and then place my fennel in. You can do the same sort of thing with red onion or whitloaf. The idea is to braise that vegetable in a sweet and sour master stock. So once that gets some heat, I can put my fennel in. Duck breast. Duck breast is a great product. It is quite fatty on the outside, but the meat itself is really lean. So you've got to get that balance between having enough fat left on the skin side that renders through the meat itself and keeps it nice and moist. And you're always looking to cook duck breast sort of a medium to medium rare. It should be nice and pink on the inside. So because you can see there how much fat there is underneath that skin, and there's the really lean meat itself. So you need to give that fat a chance to run away. So score your duck breast to allow that to happen. And then we are going to cook it on quite a low heat to render as much of that fat out as we possibly can, so that we end up with a nice, crunchy, clean skin with a really moist and lightly pink breast underneath it. All right, so we'll prepare both of our breasts the same way. Same again, just to score, to allow that fat to run out from underneath the skin. Very good. And then I'm just going to season this breast. So a nice amount of salt on top of the skin. So you want a good coverage of salt on both breasts. And that salt's going to draw any moisture that is in that fat. That salt's going to draw it out. So we're going to let that sit for about 10 minutes, and then we'll wipe them down with some paper towel and they'll be ready to cook. Move on with our fennel though. So we've got some heat in this pan now. So pop in our fennel rounds. At this stage, all I want to do is get some colour on both sides. I'm not trying to cook it through, I'm just allowing there to be colour, and then I'll add my stock to be able to braise that fennel, and then I'll turn the temperature right down. Once I've got colour on one side of my fennel, I'll turn it over and start to get some colour on the other side. That's when I'll add my stock ingredients. So chicken stock, star anise, garlic, the same 1-to-1 ratio of vinegar to sugar. I'm using a sherry vinegar just because it's going to go well with that star anise flavour, and a little bit of salt on top of that. At this point, I'm pretty happy with that. I just want to reduce that sauce down a little bit more and then I can turn that off. I'm going to use some paper towel just to get rid of any excess moisture that salt has brought out of the skin. And then I'm going to pop my duck into a cold pan and start to bring the heat into it. Gently on a medium heat, I'm going to get that all the way through, almost cooking it completely on the skin side so that we render as much of that duck fat out as we possibly can. So my duck can go into my pan now. Don't need any oil. As that heat comes into the pan, that'll start to render out all of that fat, and that's what we'll end up cooking and basting in. Just want to taste this stock that we've created, which will end up being the sauce of the dish as well. That's pretty good. I reckon 2 more minutes and I can turn that off and allow it to sit. That'll stay warm while we cook our duck. I turned my duck about 30 seconds to a minute ago. I can turn my pan off completely now. Just bring a little bit of heat back into that fennel. I want to let that rest. I'll take those breasts out, pop them on my board, and just allow them to rest for about 5 minutes. By then, our fennel will be nicely heated through and we can plate up the dish. Place your fennel in the bottom of the bowl and put as much of that sauce or that sort of braising stock as you can in there. Then cut up your duck, lay that on top, a little bit of salt on those open sides of cut duck. And there is a special dish that you'll be surprised at how much flavour that fennel soaks up from that braising stock and how tender and juicy the duck is when you allow it to cook for all of that time on the skin side. Our skin is nice and crispy, which is what we want, and our duck is cooked perfectly.
It's days like this that I feel pretty lucky to have this gig. This is Avalon Coastal Retreat, and it is without a doubt the best accommodation I've ever set foot in. Come and have a look. How about the view? Absolutely phenomenal. It's almost 360 degrees, right up the coastline, heaps of glass. We've got a beautiful fireplace. Absolutely, like, it's so luxurious. The couches just warm and warm and soft, you know? You just bunker in overnight, it would be just magic. There's 3 big bedrooms. Well, they've all got en suites, one of which has this massive wooden bath. Pretty keen to get in that later. Anyway, let me show you outside. Wow, absolutely phenomenal. We're in the middle of the east coast of Tassie. We've got marine farms, we've got the best seafood in the world, some world-class wineries as well to boot. And the scenery's not bad either. We've got rugged cliffs, beautiful white beaches. There's just nowhere else in the world quite like it. To boot, Avalon Retreats has its own private beach just down here. So follow me and we'll go and have a look. Beautiful. I mean, beautiful accommodation, but if people aren't really your thing, a private beach as well, not bad. My footprints are the only ones on this beach. The view's spectacular. I don't think there's much more to say, really. I'm gonna catch dinner.
Avalon is particularly beautiful, and it's one of those places that I do go regularly to get away from everything. It's just a nice place to relax on the East Coast. You don't really need to leave the accommodation, and you can just sort of sit there, take in the view, and let the beautiful East Coast vibe wash over you. It's wonderful. All right, cobbler. I think I like cobbler for two reasons. One, I like the name cobbler, and two, it's a really simple dessert that you can make in no time whatsoever. So we're going to make a cobbler. We're going to do an apricot cobbler. Apricots, I've just got a large tin of apricots. I'm going to pop that into a saucepan. I'm going to reduce it down till it's almost jammy. A little bit of sugar. It's not going to need a lot because they are in syrup. The one thing it is going to need though is a thickening agent of some kind so that our cobbler doesn't get watery. So I've got some arrowroot. Pop that in, about a teaspoon and a half, tablespoon of arrowroot. Turn the heat on. I'm just going to let that simmer until it's almost like apricot jam, so it thickens up quite a bit. Once that's done, I'm going to make my cobbler mix. So that's really simple as well. Flour, sugar, a little bit of polenta, buttermilk and butter as your wet ingredient. So I'm going to melt the butter and add that with the buttermilk and mix it together. And it's not like a cake batter, it makes like a dough, almost like a scone dough. We're going to break those into little round balls and pop them on top of our apricot mixture. And it's going to look like cobblestones. That's how it gets its name, cobbler. My apricot mixture is done. I'm happy with that. I'm going to allow it to cool a little bit while we make our cobbler dough or batter. More of a dough, I would say, than a batter. So into a bowl, all the dry ingredients go first. So I need a cup of plain flour. And this is the whole idea of a cobbler, is that it's cobbled together and looks like cobblestones in the street. So measuring things is kind of against the whole notion of what this is. So you're after a texture and a feel rather than measurements. So about a cup of flour, about 3/4 of a cup of sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder, some polenta, not much, just about 1/4 of a cup of polenta. Mix all that together. A pinch of salt as well. Pinch of salt. Mix that together. And if you've ever made scones before, you're after a similar sort of consistency to scones. You want to be able to sort of roll it, knead it a little bit, and be able to pop it on top of your apricot mixture. So we're going to use butter and buttermilk as our wet ingredients. So our butter, 110 grams of butter we had. Going to add that in. And our buttermilk. And bring it together. So this is where you're going to add a little bit more of one ingredient or the other, depending on what you need. We're going to need a little bit of flour, probably another quarter of a cup to half a cup of flour, so that would make 1/3 of a cup of flour. I reckon that's going to be pretty close. It's just going to allow me to handle the dough to be able to place it on top. Yeah, that's pretty much done. Okay. So that's my that's sort of the consistency you're after for the cobbler mixture. So something you can pick up, sort of roll and place on top in a tray. So I'm happy with that. That's done. My apricot mixture is done. That's thickened up. So you want to leave enough room at the top to be able to put your cobbler on. You have got baking powder in your dough mixture, so it's going to rise a little bit. We've got our oven set at 180 degrees. So roughly roll these into a bowl and place them on top of your apricot mixture. And we're probably going to get between 6 and 8 of these balls, depending on the size that you make them. Done. I got bigger as I went along. That can go into the oven now, like I said, about 35 minutes. And you really, again, you're looking for it to be done to the eye. There's no use putting a skewer into the dough or anything like that. You're just making sure everything's nice and golden brown. The apricots are nice and jammy and sticky, and it'll be done. Into our oven. And we'll come back and have a look at it in about half an hour. Our cobbler is finished cooking, so I can take it out. Turn our oven off. That's what you want to see. Oh, look at that. Yum. I would allow it to just sit for a while before you serve it. Just let it relax a little bit and then get stuck into it. Cobblers may be simple, but they are very yummy. Now, to finish off today's episode, we're going to look at knife skills and some tips and tricks to make sure that your knives and your scissors, your kitchen scissors or shears, stay nice and sharp. Now, with most knife blocks, especially the one we've got, you get an assortment of knives, but you also get a steel. Now, a steel won't sharpen your knife, it'll just keep an edge on the knife that's already there. So what you're doing is actually taking off any of the grit or any little barbs that when you've been cutting, you've hit the edge of the knife and you've got a little bit of a dent in it. Now, it's not going to sharpen the knife. The steel itself is not hard enough to get an edge on the knife. It will just keep the edge you've already got. So you want about 9 to 10 degree angle running down the length of the blade one way and running down the length of the blade the other way. Now, you don't have to move it quickly like that. That's kind of showing off. Soft and smooth will get the job done. You want a couple of goes one way, a couple of goes the other, and that will keep your edge nice and sharp. Now, I recommend every day before you start chopping to run your knife through the steel. It'll keep your edge nice and sharp. And you can do that with all of your knives. So it's a fantastic little piece of kit to have in your knife block. To finish off our last little session of knife skills today, I'm going to show you the basics of cutting. So how should you hold your fingers? How should you hold onto the thing that you're cutting? And what's the movement that you make with your blade? The main thing that most people are going to cut a lot of at home is an onion, so we'll work with an onion. So you get your chef's knife, which is this one. Chop your onion in half. I always cut it in half before I peel it. I find that it's a little bit easier to peel once it's been cut. Now, if you're doing onion slices, then you'll turn the onion around that way and you make like a little claw. So when I dig my fingers into the onion, you'll see my fingers, so my fingers go in and then my hand rolls forward like that. So that when I make my first cut, I move my knife out and I come back and hit that knuckle. And when I hit that knuckle, I push down again. And I just slowly move my fingers back along the onion like this. And as I move my fingers back, every time I come back and hit the knife, I'll slice a new piece of onion. And if you just worry about that hand, you'll keep everything nice and safe. You cannot cut your fingers off if you're using that technique. So that's it for our knife skills today. Not sharpening your knife, but a great way to maintain the edge on your knife. The same with your kitchen shears and some basics of chopping. See you next time.